This is part 54 of my series on my N-gauge model railway project. Previous parts covered the project from its inception through the creation of the baseboard, selection and laying of track, building of scenic items, obtaining rolling stock, etc. The project is ongoing. This part deals with 3 new locomotives that recently arrived on the layout, and I think I can fairly say that these are a little unusual in the way of locos, a little out of the common run of current N-gauge things. The new locos are firstly a kit-built member of the Patriot class, also known as Baby Scots. Secondly, a Coronation class Pacific, which I converted from its identity when I bought it as King George VI in BR livery to the Duchess of Buccleuch in LMS Crimson livery. And lastly, a Union Mills Great Western Dean goods, nicely detailed by the same gentleman who made the Patriot. So let's have a detailed look at these locos first, and also at the process I went through to convert King George VI into the Duchess of Buccleuch, and then we'll see a little video of the new locos pulling trains on the layout. What you can see here is the Patriot and the Dean goods at top right, with the Duchess of Buccleuch at the bottom, and the way she came as King George VI at top left. Here's the Patriot on the rails, after I had done my initial repairs from the indignities it suffered in transit. Both the crew had come out, the poor driver had his head jammed in between the wheels and the valve gear, one of the steps was broken off, and there might have been a couple of other minor things. The seller had packed it very carefully, but it was in an old Graham Farish box, and the plastic insert of that box, being old and brittle, just basically fell apart under the shocks of transit, leaving the loco to fall around inside the box. It was making some very nasty, worrying, rattling sounds when I got it from the courier, but fortunately repairs were quite easily accomplished, and the gentleman who built this loco from a kit did some beautiful work. I couldn't manage that lining, which he appears to have done freehand. I was particularly pleased to get this loco, as it fits right in with the end of my grandfather's career as a driver with the LMS. The Patriot class were express passenger locomotives built for the LMS between 1930 and 1934. They were essentially based on the idea of using a Clawton boiler on a Royal Scot frame, and so they were often referred to as Baby Scots. My granddad retired in the 1930s after a long career as a driver, first with the Midland and then with the LMS. As a senior driver in his last years, he often drove passenger expresses, and so may well have driven this class of loco. So I like to think that that could be my grandfather there on the footplate, though thankfully I'm sure he never fell out and got his head caught in the wheels. I had to use a strong magnifying glass together with magnifying spectacles to be able to read the nameplate on the loco. It is the Bunsen, which was built at Crewe in 1932. I'm not sure what chassis was used in fitting this kit loco, but it seems to be a nice smooth runner. Here it is pulling a small rake of mid-period LMS corridor coaches, which are fitted with the bellows connectors, which I discussed in detail in an earlier video. Here's that train in Colville Station. Apart from its beautiful appearance, I was very pleased with the running and pulling characteristics of this loco. Here's the train going over the section of track that I finally got around to ballasting by the woods I recently planted at the east end of the layout. Obviously there's still more work to be done on the landscaping of the layout. To be honest, I don't like jobs like ballasting, so I tend to keep putting them off. Now let's turn to the Coronation conversion project. Here's the loco as I bought it, as King George VI in British Railways lined green, unstreamlined with smoke deflectors. I picked this loco up at a reasonable price locally from tiny railroads in Delhi, Ontario. It's not something I would have sought out to buy, as I don't do British Railways. I'm trying to model operations in the 1930s with a special focus on the British Midlands. But this loco was to hand locally at a good price, and it was originally an LMS loco, being a member of the Coronation class, so I went ahead and bought it. King George VI was so renamed as a patriotic gesture in 1941. The locomotive was originally named City of Leeds. More problematically for me, given that I wanted to convert it to a pre-war LMS loco, it was built with streamlining, and the streamlining wasn't removed until well after the war. So if I was going to try to remake this BR Loco into an LMS Loco, although it was of an LMS class, it would need to change identity. There were several Coronation class Locos that were built for the LMS late in the 1930s without streamlining. The first of these was the Duchess of Buccleuch, which went into service in 1938. I checked with Fox Transfers and found that they did make N-gauge nameplates for the Duchess of Buccleuch, so I went ahead and ordered those and also a set of decals for LMS lettering and numbers. Once the nameplates and decals arrived, I went to work on the Loco. Taking the top off the tender, I found that to separate the Loco and tender, I would need to desolder the wire connecting them. So I fired up my soldering station. I can't lie, I'm not fond of soldering, but since I have to do some fine soldering from time to time in support of my various hobbies, I bought this soldering station a while ago from my local hobby shop. It's not high-end, but it's certainly better than the cheap soldering irons I was trying to work with before. This wasn't a particularly tricky task compared to working with tiny circuit boards. Once the wire was desoldered from its terminal on the tender, I could work on the tender and Loco separately, which was much more convenient. Next, I removed a screw located above the bogie, or below the bogie when you've got the Loco upside down, which allowed me to slide off the smoke box and smoke deflectors. This was as far as I went with disassembling the Loco. I would have liked to work on the body without the motor and wheels, but I wasn't sure of the disassembly process. I couldn't find a manual or anything anywhere, and I decided it probably wasn't worth attempting, given that it wasn't really necessary and there was definitely a potential for problems. So I'd done as much disassembly as I was going to do and was ready to work on refinishing the Loco and tender. I used Model Master enamel in British Crimson. I actually had this on hand from naval modelling, where it was used on the bottom of ships. But I thought it looked a pretty good match for LMS Crimson Lake, which seems to be the subject of considerable uncertainty anyway. Different models and paintings render the colour over quite a range of shades. I was pleased to find that the Model Master enamel seemed to take quite well and to cover fairly evenly and effectively. The paint does tend to run away from the edges where the surface bends, but otherwise it seems to settle quite well. This was just brush painted. You can't see the BR logo on the tender at all anymore. Next I worked on the Loco. Not surprisingly, the enamel didn't cover so well on the curved textured surfaces, but still it made a reasonable start. I put a second coat on the tender after the first coat dried. I felt this produced adequate cover. The Loco is going to need at least one more coat, but it's not looking too bad. I got into a bit of a misunderstanding here. The Fox plate set said it came with 2 nameplates and also 2 number plates, so I assumed those number plates would be for the cab sides, so I mucked around trying to change the running number on the smoke box using some small white number decals that I had. Meanwhile, I also went on with recoating the paint on the Loco. Because the enamel tends to run down somewhat, I did it in stages, one side at a time. Here's the result of my efforts to change the running number on the smoke box, 6230 being the running number for the Duchess of Buccleuch. I also realized at this point that the smoke deflectors detach from the smoke box quite easily. After recoating each side of the Loco, I recoated the top portion of the Loco body. Now that it was dry, I was quite satisfied with the cover on the tender sides. I didn't attempt lining. It would have been nice, but I felt it was beyond my abilities to do it well. Here's the smoke box door after a coat of clear acrylic. It turned out my work here was misguided, as actually the Fox plate set included a number for the smoke box, but it did not include numbers for the cab sides. Those needed to be done with decals. Here's a tentative assembly of the Loco and tender, with the Fox nameplates now attached and decals in place for the numbers on the cab sides and LMS on the sides of the tender. The lettering on the tender is not really large enough, but these were the largest letters that came in the Fox decal set. I also put the Fox number plate on the smoke box. They actually provide 4 small number plates, 2 each with the LMS number and the BR number. I just used the 1 LMS number. I know I should really have done more in the way of detail painting, but I felt I had to be content with what I could do with some likelihood of competency. You can just about make out the Fox number plate on the smoke box here. Now the loco and tender needed a final coat of clear acrylic, mainly to protect the decals. I masked the loco so as not to gum up the working parts, which was a definite worry. Now I fired up the soldering station again to solder the wire from the loco back to the terminal on the tender. Then I reattached the coupling bar between the loco and tender. And I tested the loco in the servicing cradle, taking the opportunity to also clean the wheels. Around this point I found this rather splendid painting of the Duchess of Buccleuch in one of my books about the LMS. This picture was painted by Alan Fernley in 1938 or 1939 and depicts the Duchess as she was originally built in 1938, pulling a passenger express up the climb towards Shap Summit. With this inspiration I decided to have my Duchess without smoke deflectors, so I made a plastic plug from a piece of an old sprue to fill the hole where the smoke deflector piece originally fitted into the smoke box. And here she is on the rails. Definitely some shortcomings, but I still felt the exercise was moderately successful. Clearly more detailing would be nice, but I know my limits. I did have some difficulty running the revised loco at first. The tender kept derailing on curves, and to cure that I needed to loosen the screw attaching the coupling bar, and also to carefully reposition the wire connecting the loco and tender, which can itself exert enough pressure to derail the tender, which is fairly light if the wire is positioned wrongly. Here's the Duchess alongside the Patriot in Colville Station. Sadly, the Duchess still showed one nasty habit that I had trouble curing. The front bogie didn't ride on the rails very firmly, and so had a nasty habit of going the wrong way on diverging points, causing a derailment. I wasn't really sure what could be done about this problem. Okay, I just now had another go at it, actually, and this is after the running video shown here was made. I adjusted the tension of the screw connecting the bogie, and I think more significantly I lightly oiled the axles of the bogie where they run in the plastic frame. This does seem to have helped quite a bit with the derailing problem. I was able to get the loco past diverging points, both running at speed and running slowly without derailing. Here she is pulling her train through the rather crowded area coming into Scraptoft Station. No problem with these points as they're converging. And here, going past the newly planted woods, these coaches are current Graham Farish Staniers, except for the restaurant car, which is actually BR, as nobody seems to have ever made any kind of LMS dining car in Engage. And here's the last loco to feature in this video, although it was actually the first bought. This is from the same gentleman who built the Patriot. In this case, he's detailed a Union Mills model of a Great Western Goods. And this only just arrived in the post to me because this one was sent, basic parcel post from the UK, so it took a while to come. And here it is on the rails. The Dean Goods engines were very long-lived. They were built in the 1890s, and the last of them was withdrawn by BR towards the end of the 1950s. They were mostly used for goods trains on lines demanding a lighter axle loading, especially on the GWR's Welsh lines. Dean Goods locos also did war service overseas in both World Wars. Here's the Dean Goods pulling a small mixed goods train made up of various GWR stock I've obtained recently. At the front there's a siphon bogie wagon used for transporting milk churns. I built that from a Cavendish kit. At the back is a GWR furniture cane container on a Conflat kit built from a Pico kit. The Dean Goods had no problem pulling a train up the steep curve gradient to the viaduct, which didn't surprise me as it's a Union Mills model, and I've always found them to be excellent pullers. Here it is going over the viaduct past the yard. I have to get round to putting footplate crew on as many as possible of my other locos. Seeing them there definitely enhances the realism. Anyhow, now let's just see a little video of these new locos running on the layout. Okay, so let's see if we can just have a look at these recent rolling stock acquisitions. So first I'm going to have a look at the Patriot, the Baby Scot here, which I've got in Colville Station with a little passenger train, and we'll try and bring him out and round. This is a very nice kit-built engine built by a gentleman in the UK who passed away recently. I bought it on eBay from his son, and he was obviously quite a model maker. He's finished this rather beautifully. Of course you'll see it better in the still pictures than you can in the video here, but there it is, and it runs nicely as well. I'm not quite sure what chassis he used. I think it's a Graham Farage chassis, and it's got 4 LMS coaches behind it, which are the older style LMS coaches, and they've got those bellows connectors between them, which we've seen in an earlier video, which work quite well with these older coaches, although I wasn't able to get them to work with the newer Stanier coaches. He may just, yes he does, famous last words. I didn't, he actually struggles a bit to get past the viaduct there, quite honestly. He's actually clipping the viaduct with the front of his bumper bar. He's about the only thing that does, oddly enough. His bumper bar sticks out a little bit further than anybody else's, unfortunately. I'll put the brake on here. The brake effect on this sound card is not good though. It just produces this kind of dull grating sound. I like the one on the US Light Steam that produces a squeak better. Okay, so now let's just have a look at the other locomotive that was made by the same gentleman. And that's a Dean Goods, a Great Western Dean Goods locomotive, which I've got hooked up here with a little train of Great Western stock. Now this has been nicely refinished by this gentleman with a crew and everything, but it's not actually kit built, it's a Union Mills locomotive, and as such it's a nice puller. What's behind it is, well, I've got a Great Western siphon there, which I built from a Cavendish kit, and otherwise a bit of a mixture of some Great Western rolling stock that I've brought recently. At the back there's a Great Western container on a conflat built from the Pico conflat kit. Oh, I should have stopped that as we went by that end, shouldn't I? The only thing that came adrift on this one as it came across the Atlantic was the lamp on the front, which I glued back on. I had a little bit more trouble with the Patriot. The crew came, it got bashed around a bit more in transit, and the crew came out and one of the steps broke off, and it needed a little bit more tending to before it was all reassembled and working. But taking him around one more time because I forgot to stop him the first time. He doesn't have any real problem up the incline because he is a Union Mills loco, so he's, as Union Mills locos usually are, heavy and tender driven. We've got the clocks chiming 4 p.m. now. Okay, so we'll put his brakes on, because in fact he would only have brakes on the loco. He wouldn't have, this would be fitted, so he wouldn't have brakes. Maybe we'll just see if we can back him up a tiny bit there, can we? And he's got the crew in there and everything. Very nice. The Union Mills locos can benefit from a bit of extra detail. They're very nice locos and they run very well, but they don't come from the factory terribly detailed. But that gives you some scope if you want to do that. And I may do more work on some of my other Union Mills locos. Haven't at the moment, but I may. I have a project underway to put lamps on things at least, and I've finished, although I don't think I've got quite enough lamps for everything. I've finished a whole bunch of lamps, but not enough, I fear, for everything anyway. So we'll bring him round. Maybe we'll stop him in Bilston Halt there and leave him there. Now I'm going to try and bring out the Duchess of Buccleuch, which I finished from, it was originally a King George VI, British Railways King George VI. Now, he's a wee bit of a problem in that his bogie has a nasty habit of going in the wrong direction on diverging points, so we'll have to see. I don't know whether I'll be able to get him round without him derailing, unfortunately. We'll try. Otherwise, he's, you know, he runs quite well, but I just have trouble getting that bogey to, this is a, yeah, this is, as I say, this is a Graham Farish Coronation class, which I bought locally, but it was in Briar Green as the King George VI, which was originally the city of Leeds, renamed King George VI in 1941. But of course that was streamlined till well after the war. Duchess of Buccleuch was the first non-streamlined, the first engine to go into service as a non-streamlined engine with the LMS in 1938. So that's how I finished this. This has got Stanier coaches behind it, well, and a restaurant car, which is actually a BR restaurant car, which is a cheat. But that's because because nobody makes, sadly, nobody makes, as far as I know, an LMS restaurant car in N-gauge. So if I want a restaurant car, the only way I can do it, well, I could do some more kit bashing, I suppose. Actually, they ran some beautiful 12-wheeled restaurant cars. I'm not going to take him right up to the point there because he has a nasty habit of derailing at that point. Okay, well, that at least gave you a quick look at those running on the net.